Hi everyone, welcome to Tammy's Creative Cards and Crafts. I'm Tammy, and today is Beginning Basics number 9 series, and the series today is coloring. And I'm going to show you some basic coloring, some tools, and some neat little tricks that you can do with some different, like I said, tools and some of the things that I use to color my cards and projects that I use. So hopefully I can show you, and you may be able to use some of these things. Some of these things you may already be using, and but I'm just showing them to you, and maybe you might find a little tip or trick that may be helpful to you. So the first thing I'm going to show you is one things that I use when I'm coloring is markers. Now, there's two different types of markers. They fall into two different categories: alcohol-based markers and water-based markers. Now, both of my markers happen to be Stampin' Up. Again, I'm not a Stampin' Up demonstrator. I just happen to have quite a bit of Stampin' Up products, and I do happen to like their products. However, I'm not being paid to endorse them in any way. I just find that their stuff is great quality, but I do have lots of other products by other companies that I totally endorse as well. So my markers happen to be Stampin' Up. These are alcohol-based blends, and they are double-ended. So on this end is a smaller tip, and on this end is a larger tip. And when I store them lengthwise like this, never on the end. Always store your markers laying down like this to keep the ink nice and even. You never want to store your markers up and down because, well, all your ink will just go to one end. And just imagine if your tip was at the top, well, all your ink's going to end up at the bottom. And likewise, if you put your tip at the bottom, all your ink will end up down. Anyways, keep your markers on an even keel like that, and it'll keep your ink. It'll make your markers last longer. So that's a little tip. The other type that I use is the Stampin' Right markers, and these ones are a water-based marker. And again, they have two tips. A thicker end on this end, which is almost like a little paintbrush, and a thinner end on this end. These markers in the blends usually come in, they are sold separately, but when they are sold, you can usually buy them in sets of 2. So say, for example, this one right here, this color is dark Calypso Coral. Well, then you can also buy the light Calypso Coral. So you can buy them as a set and buy the 2 tones together. Or say, for example, you happen to be just using the light one a lot and you use up this one. Well, you may still have lots of the dark. Well, you can replace the light one. So you can buy that one separate. So that's great. I do like that aspect of that. And I have a holder that holds my markers across like this without having them stand up. the same as these markers. You can get them in many different colors. So when you're using these markers, you want to use them with a very light touch. Like I said, there's many different colors. And yeah, so these are two of the things that I use when coloring projects. Something else that I use a lot is blender pens. Now, it looks like a marker, but it has a little white tip on the end that it's wet. It has kind of like a little solution in here. And it has a tip on each end. And they're filled with like a liquid that allows you to pick up ink and blend it on various surfaces. Spread your color around. You can hold it like a pencil, so that's nice. It's nice and thin, and I do like that. So I do love the blender pens. Now you use this for like if you're going to be painting almost like watercolor looks on your pictures. And I always use watercolor paper when I'm using blender pens because it does saturate the paper, and when you're using watercolor paper, your paper doesn't get too wet. And if you use it on regular cardstock, your cardstock will start peeling up and stuff, where if you use watercolor, it doesn't do that. So I'm going to show you how to use these properly as we're going along. Another tool that I have is this Aqua Painter, and it has a brush on the end of that. And they come in a set of two, and this one here I can show you actually has a bigger brush on it. It's just like a little paintbrush in there. And what you do is you open it here. And this one doesn't have water in it right now. And you just fill that with water, and you can put the top back on. This one has water in it. And you put this in your ink. You touch this to your ink, and because it has a little bit of water in it, it spreads the ink very lightly, and you're able to also give it a very watercolor look to your projects and cards and stuff like that. And it's a very nice thing to use when you're making pictures. These are also used with a water base on watercolor paper and water base inks. Now, when you're using your blender pens, your Aqua Painters, and your water-based markers, you must use your StazOn ink. And if you remember when I showed you the inks the other day on the other video about inks, this is your water-based ink that you have to use when you're using water-based products. So this is the one that I explained. This smells like almonds. This is called your StazOn. So you stamp your image in this first, and then any of these products will not make your ink run. Yeah, so that's your StazOn. Now, when you're using your alcohol-based markers, you can use these with StazOn. That's no problem, but it will also work with your regular Memento ink because these are alcohol-based markers. So you can stamp with Memento ink. And also, I also color with watercolor pencils. And they come, again, in very different, all different colors. I have a few different sets, and they're fantastic to color with. I use this in combination with my blender pens or my Aqua Painter, and they give a very cool effect, which I will show you in just one second. And again, you want to use your StazOn ink with these, so your color does not run because you're using some kind of water, hence the name watercolor. I mean, if water is in any part of anything that you're using, it's going to be StazOn, if that'll help you remember what ink to use. So, those are some of the things that I use when coloring. So the first thing I'm going to show you is blender pens. Now, my blender pen here, I'm just going to pick out, this is, I've had this, I stamped out an image. It's just a flower. And this is stamped with StazOn ink, which I'll just leave there so you can see that. Okay, so this is just stamped with StazOn, nothing else. And I have a blender pen, and I have a regular colored ink pad. Now this happens to be a Stampin' Up! One, but you could have any kind of colored ink pad that you may have. Now with mine, I'm just going to press on the lid here. You don't have to necessarily do that, but see, when I open that up, it gives me a little bit of color in the lid that I'm going to use with my blender pen. So I'm just going to bring that over here. Now, when I'm using my blender pen, I always have a little piece of scrap paper. This is just a little piece that I had punched out some stuff, so I'm just going to have this for scrap. You take your blender pen and dip it in your ink and get some color on your blender pen. And then you're just going to go on your flower, and I'm going to start wherever I would think the darker parts would be. Okay, and also I am stamping on watercolor paper. Okay, so what I'm just showing you is I'm picking up the color with this blender pen, and I am going in from dark, and as I'm working out, it goes from dark out to light. As the color comes off of the blender pen, it works out gradually to the lighter areas, and then you can see how you can touch that up and see how that gives it a very beautiful watercolor effect. You can go into the next inside of that flower and work it out again. Go in, pick up some more color, and you can, it's your imagination how you want your picture to look. You can play around with it however you like. Maybe you'd like the sun to catch it a little bit on one side like that. And if you want to take a little bit of the color off, just tap it on there and take a little bit of it off. And so then it'll be a little bit lighter in areas. See, and then you can make it lighter and darker in other places. See, and then you can bring it over darker. And so this is how the blender pen works. It's absolutely a fantastic tool. I absolutely love it. That's how you give beautiful effect to your little flower in a couple seconds. You can give that a really pretty effect. Okay, so that is your blender pen. So now I'm going to show you, I'm just going to put this up here. Okay, so you can see that. And now I will show you the the Aqua Painter. That one doesn't have any water in it there. So now the Aqua Painter, you're going to do the exact same thing. It has a little bit more water in it. So this one is going to be a little bit lighter. And what the trick is with this is you're just going to go over one coat, and then you will come back and darken it after it starts to dry. And it doesn't take long. And if you feel you have too much water, go over and just dry that off a little bit. And you can see how it starts lightening in areas. And see, this little part over here is already starting to dry. And I'll just take a little bit of that off. I can go and grab some more ink there. And then I can go in and try to darken there. And darken it. And it gives a really beautiful effect. And so the Aqua Painter is a really beautiful tool as well. And these are very inexpensive. They're really not that much at all, but you can have a lot of fun with these. And you can see how that's now, like I said, you can go back and darken it in the center. And, you know, your eye is the one that's, and then you go back and you take that off of there. You can squeeze a little bit of water out and it totally cleans your brush right out. So that is the Aqua Painter. And you can see there how that gives you an absolutely gorgeous effect. And the same as with your blender pen, just go back and you just scribble it until all your color comes off, and then you can just go on to your next color. Now, I will show you the watercolor pencils. So with the watercolor pencils, you would go in, and what you do is you go in and you darken in areas. Like this. And I find it very therapeutic to color. It's very relaxing. Do it when it's nice and quiet. I love music and stuff, but sometimes, and I love having music on in my craft room, but sometimes I find that I even forget to put the music on, and I'll be in my craft room for like a couple of hours just doing stuff like this, and it's totally just nice and quiet. So so now I've gone in with my watercolor pencil, and now I'm going to go back to my blender pen again. Now you can use your blender pen or your Aqua Painter for this. So go in with your blender pen and go over where your color pencil was, and you're going to pick up that color that you have gone in with, and you're going to pull it. And you can see how you're pulling that color right in to start coloring that. And you can shade it however you like. Now you can also already see the highlights in there. And all I did was just go on the edges and darken that. But as you can see, I'm just pulling it to the center and leaving little bits of white in the middle. And it gives it kind of an effect of light to the middle. And it makes it really easy to do that by only just coloring on the edges. And if you wanted it a little darker, you can absolutely do that. You can absolutely go back a little bit and add a little bit more of pencil in there. You can go in and add a little bit in there, and then go back in with your pen, a blender pen, and pull in some more. I think that looks absolutely fantastic of how the light is pulled into that, and it just gives it a very pretty effect. So I hope you agree. Let me know in the comments how you like these paintings. I mean, there's that watercolor, and it actually looks like a watercolor when it's actually done the effect. And then there is the blender pen. Sorry, there is the blender pen. I mean, they're beautiful effects. And when you start doing them, you can, I mean, it actually is just, it's so much fun. You will just really enjoy it. So those are the watercolor pencils. And again, these watercolor pencils, I mean, you don't necessarily have to have Stampin' Up. I think the Stampin' Up ones, they're under, I don't know, they might be under $15 or something like that for a set. They're absolutely fantastic. You can get them at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, or wherever craft places. You can get different kinds. There's so many different kinds that you can pick up. Now, I have one here on watercolor. Now, this is stamped with just the Memento ink, and I just wanted to show you this one. This is just going to be just with blender pens, blender markers. Now, blender markers, they actually blend together. I'm just going to see if I have the right. Okay, so what I have here is two that go together. This is a real red in the light and a real red in the dark. So in this one here, I'm just going to go around like maybe here. And then I'll go with the light. Now these ones pick up the other ink, so they start blending the darker ink into the light. So you can actually pick that up and blend it out, and it gives it a nice effect that way. And you can color right into your picture that way. And if you want to go back and make it darker in areas, you can. So those are the blends, and if I had more time, I would play a little bit more with those, because I probably could have put a little bit more light in those. Okay, if I went back with the, let's see, the dark here, might have went in more with the dark down here, and could have pulled some of these up and really enhanced the middle. Like I said, you can really play around with it and really bring out the color of those. So those ones are the blends. Now, another really cool effect that I wanted to show you is on vellum. Okay, so I have stamped this Stays On vellum. Okay, now you would think, okay, well, so now I'm just going to take my markers and color right on there. But what makes it even cooler effect on here, and it actually makes it look almost like stained glass, is to flip it over and color on the back. It gives it a beautiful effect, almost like stained glass. So take your markers, and again, you can use your blender pens. You can do this in watercolor. You can, whatever you want to color with. So let's say we want to go back with our blends again. Let's get some color off of here. So we're going to go in here and we're going to go dark, out to light. I love using vellum. It's such a pretty paper to use, and I find it doesn't get used enough on projects and stuff. I love using it. I think just people forget about using it, but it is a very nice thing to use on projects. There's so many different things you can use it for. A lot of people use it for weddings and stuff like that, for their invitations, but it's so much nice. It's such a nice paper to use. So try to get some light in there. Okay, so now that is the back where I painted. And now I'll show you how beautiful that is on the front. And when this is on a card, and say for example you have something underneath that, it actually gives it a beautiful watercolor look, but almost like stained glass. So try that technique the next time that you want to use vellum, and I promise you that you will really like the look of it. And people will be looking at it like, oh, that's really neat. How did you do that? But it's because you've colored it on the back, not on the front. So the last thing that I wanted to show you is just one more thing that you can do with markers. I have a stamp here and just a little piece of paper. And this is just a little stamp. It says Forever Friends. So I just picked this one because it had two different words on it. And say, for example, you had a stamp that had two different things on it. Maybe it's a flower and a leaf. Maybe it's two different words. Whatever the case may be. And you wanted to have those two different colors. So if I'm looking at this right now and I wanted Forever in pink and Friends in yellow, okay, well, how can I do that? Because when I go to press that on a regular ink pad, of course, that's going to be quite difficult because you can't get that, half on the ink pad. That won't work. So how could I possibly fix that? So what you do is you use your markers directly on your stamp. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to color directly right on your stamp with your marker. And make sure that you're getting all of the parts, but try not to go over any parts that you shouldn't with the color that you're using. And you're thinking, oh well, it's not going to stay, you know, wet and enough. Then I'm going to use the yellow for the bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to put my stamp over this way because my stamp doesn't seem to be wanting to stick down too good. So what I've done is inked the whole thing. And that did not work. So how about that? So what I should have done is give it a little couple breaths. And unfortunately, my little trick did not work. However, that is the first time, I'm going to be honest with you, that did not work. So there you go to show you that Candid Camera did not work on the screen. And I'm not sure why that didn't work. Okay, let's try that again. Let me just see. Okay, let's see here. Let's try a different color. Okay, maybe something a little bit darker. Sorry about that. So I'm going to do the Forever in the blue. Make sure it didn't go on the Friends. I always told you, everyone, that if I'm going to make mistakes, it's going to happen right in front of you, and that's okay, because guess what? Everybody makes mistakes, and that's all right, because I'm happy to make them in front of you and show you that everybody's human, and we can get through them together. No problemo. Okay, let's see if this works. So the trick is, now that I have it inked up as like this, what you do is huff on it. Okay, so you take a couple breaths. Like you're steaming up your glasses. And I'm going to press that down on my paper. And that's how it works. So now you can see that I have the blue in the Forever and the Friends in the orange. And that's how you do a two-tone or whatever in your stamps. If you wanted to do a stamp, say for example, if you had a flower, if this flower here maybe had some leaves from it, and you could do your flower and your leaves green, you could do your flower pink, you know, ink it all up with your markers and then huff on it 2 or 3 times. And what that does, it just gives it a little bit of moisture enough to adhere it to your cardstock. And I think that's what I forgot to do the first time, is I didn't huff on it. But anyways, there's how it ends up turning out. So again, I make mistakes. We all do. And actually, I'm happy that it happened while I was showing you, just to show you that things happen right on the video. So, and I always said if I was going to make mistakes, I'm not going to cut it out or edit it or anything like that. That's okay. We can, you can watch me do it and we'll fix it together. Because then I can show you that how to fix it. And there you go. So I hope that I hope I showed you some tips on coloring, the blender pens, the aqua pens. Look how beautiful those turned out. Like, that is really beautiful watercolor. The blender pen, the effect of it gives the beautiful dark to light. The watercolor pencils, how beautiful those are. The coloring with the vellum, doing the coloring on the back, the coloring with the blending markers, and the coloring with the two tones directly onto your stamp. Just remember to huff just before you stamp down. So again, I hope that you enjoyed the number 9 of our series. We have one more left, and that is just going to be little bits of a mishmash of little things here and there, and that'll wrap up our series for beginning basics. I thank you so much for tuning in. This one video went a little bit longer than I hoped, but I really appreciate you tuning in and watching these videos. I so much appreciate doing them for you, and I really hope that you love them and loved watching them. Thank you so much, and God bless you all. I send hugs and kisses and love to each and every one of you. Bye-bye.